So first of all, I suppose one of the things I've heard mentioned today already is about being context specific. I'm going to share a little bit about when I joined First Bus 18 months ago, the situation we found ourselves in, and a little bit about the context. Because when you start to develop a people strategy and you want it to be evidence-based and you want to create the most business impact, there's a lot you have to do. A lot of evidence you have to collect, lots of information that you need to sift through, and you need to do that at pace. You then need to make trade-offs and calls based on what do we think. And I'm going to talk about hypothesis quite a bit. What do we think as a practitioner? If we do that, what impact do we think it will make? And you have to be quite brave in that assumptions and coming up with what you think is the right hypothesis, and then you have to test it. Like in any science, you have to experiment, you have to trial, you have to learn, you have to reflect and look at the data. And then you have to go again. It's an iterative process. So evidence-based HR isn't you do it once and then you just stop. It's actually how we do our job on a day-to-day basis. So let's talk a little bit about the context, first of all. So First Bus is a FTSE 250 organisation. About £1 billion it will be this year. 14,000 employees, predominantly bus drivers and engineers. Great people, salt of the earth, 50 depots across the UK, second biggest bus company. And I suppose if I was describing it, a legacy business. You know, it's been doing things the same way for a very long time, right? What we're about are buses and timetables, right? Buses, the asset, right? That's the thing we focus on. Is it a Euro 6? Is it a Euro 5? Are we going to go EV? Lots of people fascinated by different types of buses. And I can tell you about debates about the seat coverings and colours of poles, and, you know, it's full of people that are very nerdy about buses. And timetables, which I won't go into a huge amount today. I'm not sure they are relevant at all. But anyhow, that's what the business had been run around, those two principles. Union, 78 bargaining units. We negotiate pay 78 times a year. Interesting. Okay. So very, very fragmented, different terms and conditions. I've got 32 different grievance and disciplinary processes, one with 5 levels of appeal. So we've got some legacy in terms of how we've structured our relationships with our people and our union. So people, when I arrived and I came in to do a piece of consultancy work for the new MD, and I went and did a presentation to the exec and just said, look, you know, this is a business. You have got no idea what you're doing around people. You're seeing it as a cost and a commodity. It's numbers of people doing this number of hours to get that amount of wheel turning to deliver that amount of profit. And what we had was a whole host of issues that were sort of, if you like, hindering the ability to move forward. So, as we new MDs appointed, COVID strikes. Actually, what's interesting about our business, we went down to 14% usage by customers. Okay, so government steps in, gives us lots of funding. We have 17 bus drivers die through COVID. Has a psychological impact on the organisation. And people were clapping bus drivers at that time, if you remember it quite well, because they were getting key workers to work. So COVID had an impact. You know, it fundamentally unpicked the commercial structure of the organisation. And of course, when our bus drivers were in our depots, senior management disappeared. We all went home and were working at computers in quite a lot of safety. So when I start to talk about our turnover levels post COVID, you'll understand a bit why. So we've also got a big commitment to zero carbon. We've been very brave. We said we're going to go completely decarbon by 2035. When you've got 7,000 diesel buses, that's a big commitment. 100 million a year, £1 billion in a decade. Okay, so we're doing something quite important in terms of the environment. And if you look at our business, actually, when you underpin it, we're a private sector business providing public transport. And if you look at the fabric of our country and who uses buses, it's absolutely really quite an important part of the social fabric of our country. Getting people to school, getting people to hospital appointments, often non-car owners, often in the lower two socio-economic grouping. So what you've got is a business that's going through turmoil, trying to think about how it reinvents itself, providing lots of value, trying to do the right thing. What we really wanted to do, I suppose, was start to move from being an asset-driven business to a service business, where people and customers are at the heart of the organisation. Now that's a big shift. Okay, so I'm appointed as the Chief People Officer, and I suspect Rob did. I started a conversation with the organisation. So we did a lot of diagnosis in a very short space of time. I've been doing engagement surveys every quarter of the whole workforce, and we continue to do that. That's just a way of collecting data. We're talking about emotions, we're talking about engagement, empowerment, a whole range of different data sources, but getting it directly from the horse's mouth, our employees. We did a lot of focus groups, we did some design thinking, we've picked 4 depots and started to look at the relationship. It's very clear. Our people were very clear with us in the data. They feel unappreciated. 68% of them feel they're unappreciated. So I'll give you some ratios. Supervisors to frontline staff, 50 to 1. Staff managers, first manager, 150 to 1. Right? So, if you're going to be a people business, how many of you can remember 150 names? Right? I can't. Got no idea. So, how long do you think we see our people on a daily basis? A bus driver, 7 to 8 minutes, right? You've got 150 of them. You've got 6 or 7 minutes with each of them at the same time in disparate points, right? So we've got some challenges in terms of starting to think about how we engage. But the sources of data, you look at the hard facts. Some of the data was about our turnover, which post-COVID went from normally running at about 20% up to 41%. That was a 30 million hit to the bottom line. Why did we think that happened? We had some views. Some of it was about COVID. Some of it was about the labour market had changed around us, Brexit, immigration, all of those issues. And what happened if you treat people as a commodity? If people leave, you just hire some new people, right? That's what our view was. Didn't really ever get underneath attrition. Didn't even think about what type of brand we have. How attractive is it to be a bus driver? Who wants to do those jobs? So I suppose the diagnosis went on for about 3 months, and it was a range of data sources. So clearly there was a view from me and the HR, but we engaged lots of stakeholders, internally and externally, through focus groups, through detailed conversations. We really dug quite deep to go, if we're going to do this, what are the problems and what do we think some of the solutions are? And I'll give you a diagram in a moment. We did, so the actual data collection process is part of the workflow. But one of the things that we sent out to the business is we're quite serious about changing and we want your views. And what that means is you don't have to just fill in the form. We are going to have a conversation. And we kept going back to people to test our thinking, to test what were the conclusions we were coming to. So it isn't like we did it and then we just sort of went into a dark room in HR and come up with an HR plan. There was a huge number of conversations, set piece, town halls, regular conversations, because we really wanted to keep testing and creating the buy-in to whatever the strategy was, so that it wasn't just about us doing what we think's right in HR. We did use the customer service profit chain, because again, if you're going to be a service business, why wouldn't you take some of the approaches that other service organisations have had? And it is about hypothesis, and I'll come back to that in a moment. The other thing I wanted to say is that bit I started with, it's really an iterative process. So when we then started to think about what it was, we made some trade-offs, but we piloted stuff. We tested stuff. We ran some experiments. It's interesting. We didn't talk about change and we didn't talk about transformation with our people, because that then gets people to go, oh, it's all going to change. So we're going to keep some of the things that work and we're going to change some stuff. but it's an experiment. We're going to have a pilot. We're going to try something. Language is really important when you're going through this type of transformation. But I do think that's quite important, because I think what we've done historically in HR is we like set piece. We like, that's the new program, that's the new process, communicate it, and then we do that, and it stays for another 3 or 4 years until someone else comes along and has a view of it. We do the same things. We like to manage it in a very programmatic way. And what we were saying was, we're going to go quite granular. We're going to go bottom up, design thinking, think about the system, and try some stuff in our depots. Learn from it, apply it somewhere else, learn again. It's a very iterative process. So very much try stuff, reflect, learn, go again. But you've got to have metrics. You've got to have some view about the impact you're trying to have. So once we've sort of gone through all of this process of trying to collect the data and working it through, and, this is what we ended up with. Okay? So it's sort of a relationship stuff. So at the top, you can see improved financial performance, get to 10% margin. We're at about 5%. We know that that means our businesses need to be more profitable. We know that the ESG stuff is really important. Doing good stuff by the environment's great, but actually our cost of ownership of return on capital employed is much lower if we use EV vehicles. The stuff around customer. So we said it was a customer and people transformation. So NPS, we've got yields, we've got lots of customer metrics. And we also had a lot in there about our partnerships with local authorities, because coming out of COVID, government was giving them funding, and we needed to build a much more comprehensive approach. This is a strategy map, that's all it is. But one of the things that's really important, getting it on one page and being able to have the business results at the top is really quite important. Because these things at the bottom that we're going to do in HR, they're all geared around making the impacts at the top. And actually, this isn't a people strategy. Well, it is a people strategy, but it's about improving those business results. So actually, it was owned by the ops director, the finance director believed in it. I got about £30 million to do this program, because we could have evidence of what we could demonstrate we could do in depots. If you demonstrate you can make the impact, we can reduce attrition, we can reduce absence, we can improve engagement by doing this stuff. And if we get those savings, we get those customer improvements, then you win the argument to do the big case. So the point is, I suppose, is have a hypothesis. Some of this, so we said, these are the business results. These were some of the things that we thought we would want to see, would be good indicators that things were beginning to go in the right direction. Turnover was one. Number of accidents. If you keep churning people, we know that bus drivers have a much higher accident ratio in their first 6 months. If you think about the number of, our culture, if you think about absence was really, really high. Short-term absence was really, really high. Our occupational health provider was not very good, and we had to change that. I can go on. So we started to define what we wanted to see, what we thought would be key figures. We then talked about it from a cultural perspective. So some of the things that we would want to see. Better people development, improved IR, all of those things. Then we decided what we thought the 8 key things that we were going to drive on were. The point then, I suppose, is that's a starting point. You do the activity, you've then got to look about whether you're getting the results and whether things are moving. And this isn't science. You get odd outcomes. Why is that? So, first of all, we do it at a local level. So everything's measured both nationally, regionally, and locally. Because actually we do the same thing in lots of different locations. And you have league tables of stuff. So if we get engagement of 73% in this depot, what's their absence like? What's happening with attrition? What's happening, you're looking for the relationship. So the point is, in terms of evidence, have a hypothesis. Work out what you're going to do, what your impact you're looking to make, and then start to do it. Because you're going to try stuff. You're going to iterate. So this is a very different approach. My HR community, by the way, I had to change the team around with quite a lot, and I've used CRF to help us. This was not easy. My HR team were going, no, this is all very granular. this sounds quite messy. Can't we just do this first? And then we'll do that program and then we'll go on to the next one. So this felt quite different. This felt quite awkward. It certainly felt uncomfortable. And I've spent a lot of times with the HR community saying, no, we're not going to do that. We don't think it's going to have an impact. And I'll come back to my 3 key questions, which I use all the time. But we've also had to be quite clear with business, the organisation, that if we do these types of interventions, this is the impact we're going to have, and you need to back us. So this isn't us doing stuff on our own. This is owned by the whole organisation, because this is an organisational transformation. And we've done exactly the same around customer. And we're spending a lot of time looking at the relationships between customer and employee. I suppose, let's give you another sort of an example. So in simple terms, this is a nice sort of customer service profit trying to treat our people better. And how did we do that? So there was a lot of management development. When we put something in, so let me tell you about our appraisal for bus drivers. So I said, right, how do we look at performance of bus drivers? Well, we've got something called a job chat. Okay? 14-page appraisal form for a bus driver, right? And it starts off with all the things they're doing wrong. What are their complaints this year? Their disciplinaries, their attendance, their absence, right? How many times do you think this conversation took place? Not very many. Of our 14,000, 9,500 of bus drivers, we most probably got a few hundred done every year. Complete waste of time. Hated by frontline managers, hated by frontline staff. We just removed it. Gone. What do we want to do? We want to have a human conversation. Sounds quite simple. Remember what I said about the ratios? So frontline staff, human conversation with a bus driver. What's going on in your life? What do you think about the organisation locally? How can we improve things for you? How can we improve the depot? What should we be doing? That's the conversation. Done. Some prompts for managers, some education, some training, and then we're going to do it. Of the 9,000, we're on our 3rd iteration. We do this every 4 months, and we're getting 8,500 completed. Doesn't matter about the number, other than it just shows the conversations are happening. Frontline managers go, we haven't got the time to do these conversations. So we look at their jobs, and we take away some stuff. Again, a hypothesis. We're doing, every time someone has a minor accident, we do an investigation from a safety perspective. You clip a wing mirror, you're called in, there's a conversation, it's recorded. If it's serious enough, there's multiple things. Basically, you have a disciplinary process. They used to call them love letters in our organisation. I've got another love letter. Minor incident. We just took them away. Took all of that process away. Thousands of conversations. We also looked at customer complaints. Mrs. Jones was walking to the bus stop, didn't quite get to the bus stop, complained to us. Do you know what we did? We would send that to the operating company, the depot. They would pull up the CCTV footage. They'd pull the bus driver off the route, and they'd have a conversation about Mrs. Jones approaching the bus stop. Should he have stopped? Should they not stop? We just said we're going to remove these processes. We don't think they add any value. And then we measured them. Safety hasn't deteriorated at all. We were doing stuff that was a complete waste of time. Those customer complaints, we now just apologise to Mrs. Jones and give her a free ticket. We're sorry if we didn't stop at the bus stop. All of that time, that investigate. So top-down, hierarchical, command and control. And we're going, no, it's going to feel very different. We're going to stop doing stuff. So we stray into customer. We stray into operations because that's how you make stuff happen. But it comes from the principle of what we're trying to have an impact on and what difference will it make. So engagement's clearly important. The first thing I said is you've got to do it regularly. We do it every quarter. We do it at every depot and all staff. Now, I've got a bit of fatigue about surveys, but we just say, hard luck business. It's hugely important. It's one of the ways we can see whether this stuff is moving or not. So you've got to do it granular. And you then spend a lot of time talking to frontline managers, because they kept saying, Kevin, that's your key metric, isn't it? Engagement. I went, no, that's not my metric. It's your metric. You manage financial performance, customer performance in your business every week, every day. Engagement's exactly the same. They're your people. You manage them. You lead them. In your area, Mr. MD, that's your top performing depot. That's your poor performing depot. Why is there a relationship between engagement and absence and complaints and collisions? What do you think it's saying to you? Well, perhaps my managers in Depot A are much better than in Depot C. So what are we going to do about that then? Let's focus on the managers in Depot C. So we start to create the change by giving them the data and the hypothesis to work with. So a lot of work on engagement, lots of focus on improved metrics, lost mileage. So if we get this right, we retain people and we can bring more people in. That means we've got more frequency, we run more buses, we make more money, we provide a better service. That means the NPS goes up. That means we get better financial performance. So there's a relationship between what we are doing, direct relationship between what we are doing from a people perspective and the financial performance of the business, which we've now, you have to keep playing around with this. It's not pure. You have to keep learning by going, well, could it be that? That's the point, I think, of evidence. You're consistently looking for data to test your hypothesis that if we do this stuff right, we'll get the right people outcomes and the right business results. So, some of the results, engagement's up in a year 8%, absence has gone 6 to 4, attrition's halved. So that £30 million hit that we had, when I said it went up to 41%, we've cleared, and we will be below our pre-COVID levels, well, we already are, but we'll be significantly below them this year. And the positive, how people feel about the organisation is improved 11%. So some nice soft measures, but we're getting all the hard data and results that we anticipated. So my final slide, really, I think it's quite simple. And I'm not sure if Ed, Rob would call it pure evidence-based HR. I think what I would say, this is about experience of having worked in lots of different organisations as a consultant, having done a big transformation at Royal Mail. And I spend a lot of time with my HR people saying, people come in to see me all the time. We've got a great idea. Why don't we change the incentives for the engineers? Got another idea. Why don't we do a leadership development program? We've got this fantastic idea about changing performance management. We've got a great idea. It goes on and on and on. Within your own community, but also across the business. They're always coming up with ideas. We want loads of management. Why? So you just have to go through these questions, right? For me, this is the starting point of this. Review your own HR strategy. And certainly when anyone comes to see you with a new idea, just go, why do we want to do this? Just articulate the why question. You then go, okay, I sort of get the premise, I get the idea. What difference will it make? Define a difference, a change in behaviour, a change in results. And then how would we measure it? Now, one of the things that's really quite interesting, using these 3 questions, if you go through your people strategy, I think at least 50% of it will just go because you can't answer the fundamental question. You don't know why you're doing it. You don't know what difference it's going to make. And you can't measure the results. You just stop doing it. When people come and see you, and I say this to my team, you can come in with any idea you like. We're going to be really creative. We stick stuff on walls, lovely post-it exercises. And then we go through the 3 key questions. And do you know what it helps you do? It helps you do trade-offs. It helps you to prioritize. And you go back to your hypothesis. Because this is a hypothesis. All you're trying to do is, what difference do we think it's going to make? How would we measure it? And then we're going to try some stuff. We're going to try some stuff and learn from it and, amend it, modernize it, change it, and go again. So we've got to be much more agile, much more responsive, much less programmatic, do the same stuff in the same way every year. Get more guerrilla-like. actually get things, try things on the ground, but with these 3 questions asked and answered before you start. And I think you're then on a long way, your first few big steps in terms of evidence-based HR. So it's quite a very practical way of thinking about how do you get data. But it isn't just data, is it? It is about insight. It's about insight from our people and managers and getting them to share stuff with us and then saying, we think we can make this different and we can improve it. So they buy into what we're trying to do. Not HR comes up with a plan and a range of interventions that we think is right. We spend a lot of time at the beginning and through the process sharing this. This isn't done by HR. This is a business process. We engage the business in going through the conversations and learning and pointing stuff out and owning the outcomes. So I think it changes the way that we do our work quite significantly. If you just think about the 3 key questions and then think about starting a process of reviewing what you already do and starting to think about what you could do going forward.